Rise up and shake off the dust from your soul. Life is returning, making you whole. Open and breathe in the life of the day. Modeh Ani, Modeh Ani. I am thankful. I am thankful for this day. Modeh Ani. I am grateful. I am grateful for this day. Modeh Ani. I am grateful. Modeh Ani. Modeh Ani. I am thankful for this day. Modeh Ani. I am thankful. Modeh Ani.
And we thank our friend Craig Taubman for allowing us to use his music for warming up and kind of elevator music until we begin. Craig is a wonderful musician, a wonderful human being, and a wonderful friend of ours for many, many decades. Like 50 years. So we're back. We're back, and the book of Judges is back. And I'm kind of happy to see familiar faces, mostly because we're in the middle of something. I was expecting some other faces because not one, but two people this morning, about 8 o'clock, 8:03, were in touch with me on email. One even called me to tell me that the link wasn't working. Of course, they were on the East Coast. You know, our schedule goes out now to a much wider audience, which is why we've had some people from different places. And I was thinking to myself, how do you begin in the middle of something? And I know not everybody who's here today was necessarily with us a month ago or whenever we last saw each other, but we're like in the worst part of the Hebrew Bible, probably. This is the nightmare story. We're in the midst of it, and it's going to get worse. Although the truth is, the worst thing is the issue itself, the way that a man treats a woman in marriage or in concubineship, the way that it's the men that kind of rule her life, the father-in-law and the man, this Levite man who we met last time in the beginning of chapter 19. And then, of course, the fact that nobody would bring them in, and one man did bring them in, and the people of the city wanted to rape the male guest, and he gives out the female, very reminiscent, as we talked about, of the Lot story and the angel in Sodom. And then, of course, him giving his wife out and her being gang raped to death, literally to death.
Jeez.
And then him cutting up the body to 12 different pieces and sending it out to the 12 areas of the 12 tribes. This is not a great story. This is not a story we're terribly happy is included in the canon. I'm reminded, just from a form point of view, not a content point of view, of what is probably Luther's famous quote amongst Jews. That is, Jews that study Bible studies, because it appears in a number of the commentaries, introductions to the book of Esther, in the introduction of commentaries to Esther and to less so to Maccabees. People don't study Maccabees as much in the Bible department. And that is, Luther is quoted as saying he kind of prayed and wished that two books were missing from the Hebrew canon, from the Old Testament books of the Bible, and those two books were Esther and Maccabees, because they were so Jewish. And so this wishing wishing away of things. But there's a reason it's in here, and I've been trying to think in the last few days about what does this have to say about modern Israeli society and Zionism, and that's a really tricky one, because this is totally about this is an inner issue of the tribes of Israel, and it doesn't include an enemy. So that takes away Israel-Palestine kind of dynamic. Are these things that Israelis have done to themselves? Yeah, of course, there are cases of rape and murder amongst Israelis, just like any other nation. Which brings us to a quote of another famous quote of another famous person, Theodor Herzl, who is said to have said, I think I actually tracked it down to a speech once, where he dreams of the day of a Jewish state in which Jewish thieves will be locked up in the Jewish jail. And that's an interesting comment on the state of. So in other words, the state of Israel is about normalcy, and normal. Unfortunately, normal people have these kinds of issues amongst them as well. So if you're just joining us in the last few minutes, we are in kind of in the middle. There's no way to do it. I usually try to make every study session independent, but if I guess we probably should have sent out in the announcements for today's session that please read Judges 19 before this, because we're in the middle of a story. So maybe listen with one ear and with another eye look at Judges 19 in a Hebrew Bible or on screen if you can find it. But we're going to begin in chapter 20 now. We're in the middle of the story of the gang rape and then death of a concubine of a Levite man. Please mute yourself if you're not talking to the rest of the group, and then what happens when he sends out the 12 pieces of her body, of her corpse, to make a statement, and the statement has been made, and this is the outcome of sending out those bodies. You want to sit with me, or what do you want to do? Yeah, I know, but I just okay. So Eileen, why don't you start us off by reading the first verse for us, please?
Sure. Thereupon all the Israelites from Dan to Beersheba and from the land of Gilead marched forth, and the community assembled to a man before the Lord at Mizpah. All the leaders of the people and all the tribes of Israel presented themselves in the assembly of God's people, 400,000 fighting men on foot.
Okay, bear with me a second. I'm on my own this morning, and I see we've got some new people, so I want to post the text in the chat box. I got to do it. Just a second, please. I apologize. If you have just joined us, aside from the fact that we're in the middle of a story, which might be a little bit difficult for those that weren't here the last time, we are also. I just want to point out that Ora Midbar is a progressive, a liberal community in Palm Springs, California. We have members that join us from different places around the world, in fact. But this is the way that we study here is based on critical scholarship. So if you are unfamiliar with us and you're expecting kind of a traditional way, orthodox way of study, this probably is not it. Welcome you to stay and hope you will. We're also looking for connections, not only interbiblical, intertextual connections, but also from the wonderful, rich history of Jewish interpretation and sometimes also Christian interpretation. And we also try to connect the text to everyday life, especially when it comes to the state of Israel and modern political Zionism. Okay, that was on behalf of those that we have not perhaps seen before, and the text is in the box if you don't have it. Okay, so Eileen just read the first two verses, and this is the outcome of the fact that this man sent those pieces of his wife's body, his concubine's body, around to the different tribes, and they showed up. That's making, in other words, I guess that works, and that's something also maybe to comment on our regular life. Yeah, unfortunately, this kind of stuff works. I say unfortunately because those are the headlines and the Facebook posts, social media posts that grab the most attention, and when there are gory details, something that really strikes a nerve. In this case, I would say it's good because there was something wrong. Something was wrong amongst the people. And you'll notice that the title today, and next week it'll be the finale of the 5-part "In those days there was no king," because that is a verse that continues to come up in these chapters, these last chapters, this addendum to the book of Judges, which was added probably at a later date after the rest of the book was edited. And it's trying to prove something. And when we get to the end, we're going to have to ask, okay, so what, big deal. So what of it that there was no king in Israel? Well, this case is pretty clear. There was no law. There was lawlessness, and this man wanted to point that out to the rest of the tribes. So they came together. How do we know it was from all the tribes? In other words, even though it says all the tribes, from Dan to Beersheba, from the utmost north to the utmost southern settlement. Those are that's the map here. It's like saying from the Gulf Stream waters to the whatever, from the, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. From this land is made for you and me. It's one of those things from north to south, whatever, from New York to San Francisco. And then, and what I wanted to point out here is that we're going to see these terms, Vayetzu kol b'nei Yisrael, for those that can read Hebrew, and all of the Israelites came out. Thereupon all the Israelites marched forth. Those words are going to recur later on, as one person, ki'ish echad, which is an interesting comment, right? How often is it when a whole nation acts as if they're one person? Well, we know that, right? In tragedy. When do we come together? We come together, well, it didn't happen so much with COVID, did it? But in other catastrophes, we did a lot of thinking in cheshbon nefesh, reckoning of our souls and our inner workings after 20 years to 9/11. That was talked about quite a bit. The truth of the matter is, though, is it ever really as one person? Because if we remember, let's just say 9/11, and we're just talking about Americans now, and I wasn't in the United States at the time, I wasn't living here, but it certainly did not include people that wore turbans on their heads, or people that looked as if they were from the Middle East, or other minorities. In other words, it was we need to be really careful when we use that ki ish echad as one person. When we use that, because I'm not sure that's true. And then also in reality, due to social media, due to other sociological reasons, we no longer respond to tragedy as one person. And but here, at least, it is presented as being such. And where do they go? Anybody know this place? Mitzpeh?
Mitzpah?
Mitzpeh. Did anybody ever heard of it before?
I've heard of a place called Mitzpeh Ramon.
Right. So okay. So it's mitzpah when it's by itself. When it's a construct, in other words, it's together with another word, it's mitzpeh. So Mitzpeh Ramon is the lookout over Ramon, the Ramon crater, which is not really a crater, but it's called a crater in the southern part of Israel. There are a number of mitzpehs, mitzpeh so-and-sos, or the number of mitzpah, places called mitzpah, in Israel, ancient and contemporary. This one, though, in particular, is kind of a central location for Shaul, for King Saul. And so it's connected to the tribe of Benjamin. And one of the things that's in the background here, because we have this sin that was done in the territory of Benjamin, right? If you don't remember from chapter 19, then that Benjamin is pretty much in the spotlight here, and this is going to be, and we'll see what happens. But this place, Mitzpah, was chosen probably not by accident. Maybe it occurred. Maybe there's historical reality. I don't know. But it's not by accident that it's the same place that Shaul, a lot of Shaul's life centers around as well. And then we'll see again why they came to that particular place. But then if you can read Hebrew, look at the second word or the third word before on the end of the first line. Vayityatzvu, that's the fourth word before the end. Vayityatzvu, and they all assembled there. Pinot kol ha'am, kol shiftei Yisrael. If anybody knows Hebrew here, in modern Hebrew, you'd say Pinot kol Yisrael. The corners, literally, Pinot means corners. But in this context, and in at least 3 or 4 other passages in the Hebrew Bible, one that I'm thinking of is in Samuel. Again, the story of Shaul and bringing all the leaders together. Pinot is a euphemistic term for, maybe I'm not using euphemism here, right? But it's a word for leadership. Why would the word corner be used for leader? Anybody?
Cornerstone?
Exactly. Right? Think of Psalms. I didn't see that in the commentaries, but in my mind came right away. Evan masu habonim haytal rosh pina. This is an important verse, John. You'll understand in a second. In Christianity as well, Evan masu habonim haytal rosh pina. The stone that was set aside by the builders became the foundation stone, which is said about Jesus as well. It's said about David. It's in one of David's Psalms. So yeah, because it's a cornerstone. So would we say, do we say today that that person was a cornerstone of her community? Or we say pillar, right? Do we say a cornerstone?
Pillar.
Okay. If not, we should say cornerstone. From now on, this group says cornerstone. Okay? Right. Okay. All of you who have been presidents of synagogues, I'm thinking of you, Gary Miller, and other organizations, or holding up the Torah reading. I'm thinking of you, Dan, or Sid, you just being a constant presence at every minyan. All these things that we are your cornerstones of your communities. And we'll leave it at that. Okay. And so they came together ready to fight, right? They got their swords are drawn, and they are there. They're there to talk to God because Mitzpah probably there was a temple there at that time. Okay, Sister Claire, you want to read the next section? We're at 3-7.
The Benjaminites heard that the Israelites had come up to Mizpah. The Israelites said, "Tell us, how did this evil thing happen?" And the Levite, the husband of the murdered woman, replied, my concubine and I came to Gibeah of Benjamin to spend the night. The citizens of Gibeah set out to harm me. They gathered against me around the house in the night. They meant to kill me, and they ravished my concubine until she died. So I took hold of my concubine, and I cut her in pieces and sent them through every part of Israel's territory. For an outrageous act of depravity had been committed in Israel. Now you are all Israelites. Produce a plan of action here and now.
Oh, so a few things, right? The dynamics. I don't have much to say on the language here, but a few things on the dynamics here. He tells a story. What struck you folks as when he was telling this story compared to what you remember, or what was the outcome? Anything? How would you characterize this man telling his story?
He's doing his best to get his culpability out of it.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
he's not being complicit at all.
Right. He's got nothing to do. It wasn't me. And not only that, they were out to harm me.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah, that is in the background. But dude, you were safe behind the door. And meanwhile, she was gang raped and murdered. Yeah. Did you want to add something, John?
No, it's exactly what everyone else said.
Good. That means the narrator has done a great job. And the translators have done a good job as well. Yeah, it's very much it's the me. This does remind me again of when something has happened to somebody on social media, for instance, and it may be a horrible thing, but there is this need to bring everybody into it, right? People will go on a rant on social media that they were on the phone for 47 minutes with this and that company and they didn't get this. All the kind of things that we told our friends and our family beforehand, we vented, but now we seem to think that the entire world needs to know, how long we were on the phone with the service people, or whatever it is, or I sent away, or, people, and also people often making huge things out of things that are not necessarily nearly as bad as this, right? So we've got this, he's very much in the center of it, and now what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it, right? So he has succeeded, wildly succeeded in what he set out to do. And I guess we could call what he set out to do was to find justice. We could call it that. But again, it's all in how you package it, really, right? Okay. Wayne, you want to? I'm sorry. Any questions or comments about this? We're kind of moving fast today because we got a lot to cover. I looked to see if we could cut this down into pieces. No pun intended there. Really, there was no pun intended. I wouldn't do that kind of thing, at least consciously. But this it's kind of one block. And all right, we've also been in Judges enough. It's kind of time to finish, and hopefully we'll finish next week, right? So. Wayne, if you would, please.
And all the people arose as one man and declared, we will not go back to our homes. We will not enter our houses. This is what we will do to Gibeah. We will wage war against it according to lot. We will take from all the tribes of Israel 10 men to the 100, 100 to the 1,000, and 1,000 to the 10,000 to supply provisions for the troops, to prepare for their going to Geba in Benjamin for all the outrage it has committed in Israel. So all the men of Israel united as one man, massed against the town.
Okay, and you can see the united as one man, Ki'ish Echad, provides an inclusio. We've heard that term before, especially in Judges, in the art of the narrative here. It's the beginning of this scene and the end of this particular scene as one people. This unity. The message is the unity, but also it brackets this particular these three paragraphs that we read. I don't want to go into the mathematics, although I know Dan is already jotting away with his pen and trying to figure out exactly if the numbers add up. Even if you're not, I know you are. Even if you say you're not, I know you're doing it in your head, right? But basically we understand. In other words, not everybody's going to fight in the battle, and that's something that's which is interesting. So here's something: Israeli society, right? I don't know how it is in the American army. I would imagine it's similar, although there's been perhaps maybe it's similar. But the frontline soldiers, Chayalim Kravim, as I was in the tank corps. That means are think of themselves as being at a much higher level as those who are far greater in number who are in the support staff, right? The drivers and the munitions people and the cooks and all those kind of things. And ironically, in the Israeli army, the people that have the clout and the people that get the best of everything are not the fighting soldiers. They're the guys they offload the trucks, they control the kitchen, all those kinds of things, or what kind of gun you get, what shape it's in. But there is that kind of pecking order, and people will often say in their biography in Israel, I served in a frontline unit. There may be a better word for it in American parlance, but in any case, on the other hand, if you served in the war, no matter what you did, you served in that war, even if your job was to sit at a desk in Kansas and do paperwork. You were part of that war, and the truth is so that's kind of this idea here. Everybody's pitching into this, not just the guys with the swords. It's the food and everything that goes behind it. Comments or questions before we go on? Okay, John, take it away, 12 to 16.
And the tribes of Israel sent men through the whole tribe of Benjamin, saying, "What is this evil thing that has happened among you? Come, hand over those scoundrels in Gibeah, so that we may put them to death and stamp out the evil from Israel." But the Benjamites would not yield to the demand of their fellow Israelites. So the Benjamites gathered from their towns to Gibeah in order to take the field against the Israelites. On that day, the Benjamites mustered from the towns 26,000 fighting men, mustered apart from the inhabitants of Gibeah, 700 picked men of all the force. 700 picked men were left-handed. Every one of them could sling a stone at a hair and not miss.
Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. But what's the phenomena that's happening here, right? What we already saw beforehand, he sent out to all 12 tribes, but the Benjaminites did not come. I should have mentioned that before, and that didn't bode well, right? So we already then, that was a foreshadowing. We knew that this is going to be trouble if they don't show up. And they're on their territory, but they don't send. So might be, the states, if there wasn't the federal government in Washington, maybe there's a parallel in American history pre-federal, pre-Washington, D.C., whatever, history, in that something's wrong. Let's call everybody to all the state representatives, and everybody comes except for, I don't want to badmouth Texas because everybody's like badmouthing Texas, but everybody except for New Hampshire, okay? Who doesn't like New Hampshire? What's wrong with New Hampshire? Everybody except for New Hampshire comes because there's a problem with somebody in New Hampshire, and then all of New Hampshire gets behind that problem. Even though the way the story is being told, of course, how could you possibly get behind that city, right? They did this, that mob of men that did this lynching. So that's kind of so there's all the other Israelites as one person, And then there's the Benjaminites, also as one person. Text doesn't use that language, but that's what's hinted at here, okay, assumed here. And then we get to the part that John already slightly paused in his reading, and that was the fact that they were left-handed. Sound familiar, anybody? Well, what the point of the text here is that they were, when it says iter yad yamino, that each of them were, we have to look at that term, what that means, but here it's translated as left-handed. And right after it says all of them could sling a stone to so exact that they could hit a hair on somebody's head, right? And what's implied there is they could do it with their left hand. Well, we'll have to see, or maybe their right hand. But the fact that they were left-handed did not inhibit them in any way as warriors. So, sound familiar to anybody?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the next.
Was David left-handed?
No, not that we know of. And remember, this is talking about the tribe of Benjamin.
Yeah.
Which,
Rabbi,
of course,
is there a pun on words? Maybe I go back to Bereshit. We'll get there in a few weeks or whatever. Between left-handed Yemini and Benjamin, I mean, is there a sort of some sort of play on words of how of left-handed and Benjamin and Yemini?
Absolutely. From a literary point of view, Benjamin means the son of my right hand.
Yeah.
My right-hand son.
Yeah.
That's what that literally means.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're left-handed, that's absolutely wordplay and humor from as far as the art of the narrative is concerned. But you will find in commentaries all across the board another kind of comment. And that's based on, if you flipped it to the next page, it's based on these upcoming two verses, one of which we did, but it was such a long time ago. I forgive everybody for not remembering. John, why don't you read the passage from Judges 3:15? It's the story of Ehud ben Gera, who was sent to assassinate Eglon, the fat Moabite king. Go ahead, John.
I forgot I'd muted myself. But when the children of Israel cried to the Lord raised them up a deliverer, Ehud, the son of Gera of Benjamin, a left-handed man. And by him, the children of Israel sent a present to Eglon, the king of Moab.
So interesting, right? The Benjaminite, again, here is a left-handed man, translated as left hand, but the Hebrew is iter yad yamino. We don't know what the word iter means. It might mean withered. His right, often you have his right hand was withered. So I always assumed in the story of Ehud ben Gera, that was the first. That was the first thing I ever seriously wrote about in university. My first paper, serious seminar paper in the university in the early 80s, was on the story of Ehud ben Gera. And of course, I had it in my mind, this man, who had a withered or a limping right hand, I should say, because in the story, you remember, they didn't check his right thigh. They only checked people's left thigh, because that's where you would put your knife or your sword to pull it out like this, right? But if it's on this side and you use your left hand and everybody was expecting the warriors to be right-handed. And the truth is, this right hand prejudice, not so much in my life, but I remember Mrs. Ducey, who was my 4th grade teacher, telling us that she was left-handed, and when she was a girl, that they not only would hit her, but also they tied her, because she used to write like this with her left hand and pretend she was writing with her right hand, and they tied her hand. The teacher tied her hand to her belt so she couldn't use her left hand. Maybe there's somebody who grew up with that kind of mishigas as well.
Yeah.
Anybody?
In Latin, Rabbi,
brother.
left hand. Oh, sorry. In Latin, sinister comes from the word left-handed. Yes.
Right.
There's a lot of language baggage on that word.
Of course, yeah. And also in general, in human culture, very often the right side is the masculine side, male side, and the left is the female side. And that's in Kabbalah as well. Go ahead, Jackie.
My brother and I were both, well, he's passed, but we were both left-handed, and he was older than me. And when he went to school, they tied his hand behind they tied his left hand behind him, so he had to use his right hand in grammar school.
I wonder if he went to the same school as Mrs. Ducey.
Maybe, maybe. Well,
Or
he
was
was
it
7 years
Doki?
older than me, so we're talking about, 90 years ago.
Okay, all right. Anyway, we've all heard of this kind of nonsense, and in general, yes, right hand. The fact that Benjamin would be called, "You are my right hand," right? You are my and of course, where is Jesus situated, John?
Where is Jesus in relation to what?
To God.
Oh, on the right hand.
Exactly right. Jesus on the right, right?
He said it at Dexter Patris.
Thank you. There you go. To our opera, art, medieval,
Yeah.
politics, law, and environmental and language expert, David Friedman. Thank you. Okay.
It comes from various Latin masses.
Yeah, there you go. Everybody learns the language for the Greek I know is because of biblical studies. It's not because I was in Greece. Okay. Although I have to say, the guide I had for a few days when I did go to Greece a few years ago, she was terribly impressed the first time I could read the inscription on some archaeological place. She was extremely impressed, I have to say, because she knew I was a rabbi. She says, "Rabbis, you study Greek as well?" I said, "Well, this is what I was at Hebrew University. What can I do?" All right, but so we talked about perhaps left-handed, but then we have this verse in Chronicles. John, go ahead.
The following joined David at Ziklag while he was still in hiding from Saul, son of Kish. There were the warriors who gave support in battle. They were armed with the bow and could use both right hand and left hand to sling stones or shoot arrows with the bow. They were kinsmen of Saul from Benjamin.
So it always comes back to Benjamin, but in this case, there weren't that they were left-handed; they were ambidextrous, right? Which means you're far better, right, from a warrior point of view. You can use youth, and so the debate goes on. Does it mean like Chronicles? And this could be, by the way, Chronicles, a late book interpreting that word iter yad yamino, although iter yad yamino doesn't appear here, but that could very well be that's how they understood it there. But the interesting thing is, you find in all so many of the commentaries, a historical note that this must have been a Benjaminite trait. In other words, the Benjamini, from a genetic point of view, were either left-handed or ambidextrous, and that was their prowess in battle. And then you have to ask yourselves, at least according to our approach that we take here, is it because that was historical reality, or because at one point there was a Benjaminite warrior, maybe it was Ehud, maybe it was somebody from, maybe it was this or whatever it is, and it projected upon all the Benjaminites because they were good warriors, so maybe they were thought, and we don't know. Is it myth? Is it truth? I don't know. But at least in the reality, the constructed reality of the Hebrew Bible, the Benjaminites, they can get things done the way other people can't. And take that into consideration and think of the fact that who is one of the famous, I would almost say post-biblical, but late biblical Benjaminites? Anybody?
Wasn't Mordecai a Benjamite?
That's a Purim song. And so yes, from the Purim, the Esther story, Mordecai, he's not a typical warrior, right? He doesn't pull his sword. The other people at the end of the book do, but he is able to manipulate the situation in a different way, right? So maybe that's part of that tradition as well. Okay? You can agree, you can disagree, but we're going to go on. Unless there's other comments. Does somebody want to? Okay, Trudy, would you like to read today? Okay, she'd rather not, probably because of the dog, right? Anyway, it looks beautiful up there on the hill. Idlewild, I'm sure, if it's nice down here, it must be gorgeous up there. Okay, Jackie, would you like to read?
Sure. 17.
Yes, please.
The men of Israel, other than Benjamin, mustered 400,000 fighting men, warriors to a man. They proceeded to Bethel and inquired of God. The Israelites asked, "Who of us shall advance first to fight the Benjamites?" And the Lord replied, "Judah first."
Now, a few things. First of all, you see the lopsided numbers. You got 400,000 here, and it was how many? What do we have over there? 700. So that doesn't seem like a fair fight. And then you've got another thing. The other tribes, they've got something that the Benjaminites don't apparently have, at least the way this story is told, and that is the Urim v'Tumim. They've got the oracular stones to ask. It's Sid. This is one of Sid's favorite features of all the Torah study we do. He is totally entranced by this Urim v'Tumim thing. In fact, if he found out that the Bible Museum in the Green family Washington D.C. private Bible Museum had bought stolen, that was in the, it's a story, it was in New York Times lately, bought stolen loot from Iraq, and that they had the Urim v'Tumim, he would get up, he would drive right now from Michigan to Washington D.C. just to see the Urim v'Tumim, right, Sid? We couldn't hear you. You have to say it again. Unmute and say it again.
He just left
It
Michigan.
would only take me 5 hours.
But you would go if you could see the
Yes,
Urim v'Tumim.
definitely. To see the Urim v'Tumim? Of course.
Okay. So we're going to have a rabbinic piece about the Urim v'Tumim later on if we get to it today. But right now,
Okay.
that's assumed. They ask, what should we go up? And this is a common question that you ask the Urim v'Tumim. Do you go up in war or not? And what is the answer?
Judah first.
Right.
Shoot first. And the Lord replied. I think to have the Lord on your side telling you how to fight, that sounds like a really good deal.
I do.
Right.
Yeah.
You've got a really good intelligence arm of your
Yes.
army. Okay.
You don't get better intelligence than that.
Okay. So, and now interesting, of all the tribes, why do we think Judah?
Judah was the main guy. He was the leader of the 12 tribes. He was where the kings came from.
Well, so the kings didn't come from him yet, right? Because
Well, yeah.
yes and no. This was written after. Yes, this was written at a time where the kings came from Judah.
Sure.
But and yet he didn't come yet. He is the head of the tribes. Certainly, the way that we have the version of scripture that we have, or the version of historiography, I should say, that we have, is a Judite version, right? We do have Benjaminite sections. We have Josephite sections of our Hebrew scripture, but the overall historiography that we have places Judah at the top of the pyramid. So that's certainly why it appears here as well. But let us all remember that Judah was not the firstborn. It was Reuven. We've talked many
It was
times.
Reuven.
Reuven had a chance, but he kind of blew it. He was the Shlemazel firstborn in a number of stories. Then you have Shimon and Levi. Levi, by the way, is a little bit in this story because the man is a Levite. What that means exactly, was he a tribe of Levite, or was he just a priest of sorts? We kind of talked about that in the idol of Micah's idol story. But you've got Shimon and Levi are thought to be too violent, and they're not the leaders. And at least the way that the book of Genesis ends, Judah will be the leader. Okay, so complicated stuff because we have the way that the narrative is laid out for us in the canon, the way we have it today. And then we have what we assume to be how these traditions formed, and they're never linear, they're kind of parallel. Complicated stuff, but at least we understand, according to some people, Judah was the essential leader, and we know, of course, he will be once we get to the second part of the book of Samuel. Okay. So, Jackie, why don't you read another one, 1921.
So the Israelites rose in the morning and encamped against Gibeah. The men of Israel took the field against the Benjamites. The men of Israel drew up in battle order against them at Gibeah. But the Benjamites issued from Gibeah, and that day they struck down 22,000 men of Israel.
Hoppa, 700 choice fighting men, right? This does not look good, especially given how, look at these. If this was a movie or a book we were reading, and this injustice was done, and the people come to see that justice is made, and the opposite is happening.
Yeah.
Right now, so that's day one. Let's go to day two. Sid, why don't you read day two?
Now the army, the men of Israel, rallied and again drew up in battle order at the same place as they had on the first day. For the Israelites had gone up and wept before the Lord until evening. They had inquired of the Lord, shall we again join battle with our kinsmen, the Benjaminites? And the Lord replied, march against them.
Right. So again, they go to their secret weapon, their intelligence agency, and why can they go to God? Again, what's included here is that they also pray. They also they kvetched and they prayed, right? Which we didn't have beforehand. Maybe because they were so confident in their numbers beforehand that they just kind of, the formality was, should we go up? And the
Right.
and the function of that particular passage was to say, yes, go up, but Judah should be first. In other words, to plant that seed in our hearts, the readers' hearts or the listeners' hearts. Second day already, it's not so. Should we even be going up at all? And they prayed and they cried out, because this was a huge humiliation, huge loss to them. Okay, Sid, go ahead. Another one.
The Israelites advanced against the Benjaminites on the second day, but the Benjaminites came from Gibeah against them on the second day and struck down 18,000 more of the Israelites, all of them fighting men.
Nochamol, right? Another time they suffer. By the way, we should probably mention, I don't think we did Giv'ah in Hebrew, Gibeah that you're reading. Giv'ah means hill or mountain.
Oh.
So every time when you read this and you heard this, if you understood Hebrew, you'd be thinking of they have the high ground, right? So it's not just, it's not miraculous. They have the high ground, and maybe they can use both of their hands.
They
Right?
use both hands.
Right. Like the good Game of Thrones scenes where the guy's got two. He's doing this and this, or the modern ones where they're shooting with two hands. Yeah. Okay. All right.
They're getting slaughtered.
So it seems. So it seems. All right, Sister Claire, you want to read for us? 26, 29?
Then all the Israelites, all the army, went up and came to Bethel, and they sat there, weeping before the Lord. They fasted that day until evening, and presented burnt offerings and offerings of well-being to the Lord. The Israelites inquired of the Lord, for the ark of God's covenant was there in those days, and Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest, ministered before him in those days. Shall we again take the field against our kinsmen, the Benjaminites, or shall we not? The Lord answered, go up, for tomorrow I will deliver them into your hands. Israel put men in ambush against Gibeah on all sides.
Okay. Do you notice how at night when they're back in the camp and they're about to go out, before that section grows in detail from should we go up? Yes, Judah should go first. Then it goes to we're going to cry and we're going to pray, but should we go up again? Yes, you should go up again. Then it goes to, and by the way, they had the Ark of the God with them, which had to be beforehand, but only now the narrator is saying, giving us the impression that they had gone up perhaps a little bit too overconfident beforehand. They said, should we go up? Not really meaning to. They knew they were going to go up, right? So the answer was, yeah, Judah should go first. Then the second time it was, no, you should really go up again. And their losses went down, but still a huge loss. Then finally said, really, God? And then the narrator says, yeah, because the Lord was there. Not only was God's presence there with the Ark of the Covenant, but also the chief priest was there. The grandson of grandson of Aaron, Pinchas, and which looks like it was added at a later time, which is why it's in parentheses in this translation, this particular section. But that's the way the story is right now, and then he also asks, should we go up or not? You know how people will ask you a question sometimes. I try not to do this, and I know a number of people that do this, and I have my own explanation as to why. They'll say, you want to go out to a movie tonight or not? Do you notice some people ask that or not? Yeah. To me, that or not is a huge sign of insecurity, right? In other words, if you've offered both answers, you're still in command of the situation. You're still controlling the situation, at least in your mind. And I think they are totally insecure here when they finally say, should we go up or not? Right? Or not? And in this case, they're trying to be in command and control their situation, but they're obviously not. And then finally, God goes up, but they do it this time with a different way. Beforehand, they were using their brute force of their numbers. This time, though, they lay an ambush. Okay, so that's the third time should be different, but let's see what happens. Okay, Mariah, would you like to read? Go ahead, please unmute first, and then go ahead.
All right.
We're on 30:32.
And on the third day, the Israelites went up against the Benjaminites as before and engaged them in battle at Gibeah. The Benjaminites dashed out to meet the army and were drawn away from the town into the roads, of which one runs to Bethel and the other to Gibeah. As before, they started out by striking some of the men dead in the open field, about 30 men of Israel. The Benjaminites thought they were being routed before us as previously, but the Israelites had planned. We will take to flight and draw them away from the town into the roads.
Keep going, please.
And while the main body of the Israelites had moved away from their positions and had drawn up in battle order at Baal Tamar, the Israelites' ambush was running out from its position in Ma'areb Geba. Thus, 10,000 picked men of all Israel came to a point south of Gibeah, and the battle was furious. Before they realized that disaster was approaching, the Lord routed the Benjaminites before Israel. That day, the Israelites slew 25,100 men of Benjamin.
Oh, so finally the battle has I'm sorry, all of fighting. I cut you off. The story turns here. If you were wondering, by the way, how the people of Israel heard God's voice, that's probably why in that third section it points out that the ark was there and Pinchas was there. So it's the chief priest, or at least in the official stories, who asked the Urim V'Tumim, who asked the oracle for the answer. And so God speaks, whether through shining lights of the gems or whatever it might be in the breastplate. We don't really know. That's how God speaks. But this is not a God speaking to everybody at one time, even though the narration kind of makes it sound that way. It's a designated representative to God. And in this story, there is no prophet. It might be a prophet in another story, but in this story, because it's very much in this priestly tradition of the priests are at the center. Yes, John?
It seems there's a lesson here that is probably in every one of our lives can think of it. If you have someone or something that you can get an answer from, ask the right question.
Right. Absolutely. And you have a number of
question and you get the answer to it, it didn't help you.
I don't think I brought that. Well, there is a Talmudic passage that talks exactly about that. I'm not sure if that's in the section that I think maybe it's in the section we brought. Yeah, that it's about how do you ask the question, right? Or what people will often say, again, you're not asking the right questions, right? Okay, so we see that things have changed. Without going into it, I'm sure there are those that would set up a model for you and show how they went, or pointed out a pincer movement on the map and how it went. It's not my forte so much. I leave it to your imagination. It's enough for us to understand that finally the people of Israel, maybe because, by the way, and they offered sacrifices, I forgot to mention, maybe because they didn't offer the sacrifice to the offerings beforehand. Whatever it is changed, and the narrator also puts God into the narration into the narrative as an active force here, right? Even if it's God routed the Benjaminites. The Lord routed Benjaminites before Israel. Okay, I'm going to push ahead here because I'd like to finish if we can. Richard, you want to read for us?
And we're at
We're
37.
36, 37.
37.
Yeah.
So the children of Benjamin saw that they were beaten, for the men of Israel gave place to Benjamin, because they trusted to the liars in wait, which they had set beside Gibeah. And the liars in wait hastened and rushed upon Gibeah, and the liars in wait moved out and smote all the city with the edge of the sword.
Opa. So not only did they lose the people in the field, but then the ambush, they came in. So it seems like the Israelites finally learned some of the tactics, the guerrilla kind of tactics that the Benjaminites might have been more famous for, those ambidextrous or left-handed Benjaminites. Okay, go ahead and read another section, please.
Now there was an appointed sign between the men of Israel and the liars in wait, that they should make a great column of smoke rise up out of the city. And when the men of Israel retired in battle, and Benjamin began to smite and kill the men of Israel, about 30 persons, for they said, surely they are beaten before us, as in the first battle. Then the beacon began to arise up out of the city, a pillar of smoke. And Benjamin looked behind them, and behold, the whole city was going up to heaven in flames.
Oh, so perhaps a kind of poetic justice. We'll remember there are flames in other stories in Judges as well. This burning of cities is, I'm guessing, if it comes up so many in these few short stories that we had in this book of Judges, that it was a common thing. Just burn the whole thing, right? Destroy them. Difficult scenes, especially if you're a Benjaminite, but we push ahead. And Rita Claire, do you want to read 41, 44 for us, please?
Question, Rabbi. Why, if God was behind the Israelites, why did they lose so many times in the beginning before God changed the routing?
So good question. Well, John kind of said before, maybe they weren't asking the right questions. Maybe they were not doing it for the right reasons. Maybe if we trust the way the narrative is built up here, it's because perhaps they didn't make offerings. I think because they were too self-confident. That's what I was trying to say. The Israelites were too self-confident. They didn't really ask, right? And therefore the answer wasn't really yes, go up, as much as it was, yeah, let Judah go first. By the way, if Judah goes first, it means that they were the ones who suffered. The text doesn't say this, but it follows logically that they suffered the most of the casualties. Right. And this is kind of pitting, this is foreshadowing, this story here, at least if we read the historiographic books of in this case, of say Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings, this is foreshadowing this strife between Benjamin and Judah. All right. So I think it was to teach them a lesson, Jackie, that they were too self-confident. In the end, they offered sacrifices on that third day, and that's when it really began to happen for them. Okay, let's go ahead.
There were reasons, but we don't know the reasons.
No, I think the reason was because they were overconfident, right? They were too full of themselves. They thought, well, the law is with us, right? But they forgot to take God.
Yeah, they're going to go in and...
They forgot to bring God into the picture. Maybe that would be it. Okay. Rita Claire, please. We're 41, 44.
And when the men of Israel turned again, the men of Benjamin were amazed, for they saw that disaster was come upon them. Therefore, they turned their backs before the men of Israel in the direction of the wilderness, but the battle overtook them, and those who came out of the cities destroyed them in the midst of them. Thus they enclosed Benjamin around about and chased them and trod them down with ease over against Gibeah toward the sunrising. And there fell all of Benjamin 18,000 men. All these were men of valor.
Right. Why do you think it adds that all these were men of valor? Anybody?
They were warriors.
Right. But why does it need to add it at this point?
We don't know whether we're going to need them in the future.
Well, because I guess they didn't want it to sound like they wanted them to still have some importance.
I think that one of it is you still, even though they messed up and they
Yeah.
didn't come with the rest of the people to really to solve this problem, still to give them the honor due to them. But also, and one reason doesn't exclude the other. That's one thing I've learned over the years, and that's part of my, I believe, my pluralistic approach, is that things can have many reasons and many meanings, and especially when you're talking to somebody who said, "Oh, you're saying that today, but last week you said the reason was something else." Yes, when you're when you're a detective on TV trying to solve a crime, you're always looking to catch people in their inconsistencies. But life is about inconsistency, isn't it? It's about multiple facets, multifaceted understandings. And so I think the other part of that, Rita Claire, would be that, and don't think that they were such a cinch, right? Don't think these were these lousy soldiers. You know, these were not the pencil pushers. These were these women, these men of valor. I almost said women of valor, right? Men of valor. Yeah. Okay. And Rita Claire, why don't you read the next one as well?
And they turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock Rimmon. And they gleaned of them in the highways 5,000 men, and pursued hard after them as far as Gidom, and slew 2,000 men of them, so that all who fell that day of Benjamin were 25,000 men that drew the sword. All these were men of valor.
Right. Okay, so it sounds like they totally basically wiped out Benjamin. Right, there had to have been more. We don't know.
Like that.
I'm sure somebody refers to the numbers in other places to compare how much it was. I don't think these numbers are meant to be realistic numbers. They're meant to give an idea of the fact that this was a huge, huge loss for Benjamin. And so the bottom line of the story, if we were to end it right here, would be that the people of Israel, it's almost democracy when it's the majority. If you've done something wrong, own up to it and give these offenders out and let justice be done. And if not, look what's going to happen to you. Okay, Bill, yes, go ahead.
I think one of the things about the men of valor is saying that they were all fighting men and no women and children.
Also, right. Maybe that's to show. I didn't think of that. Maybe to show that they're moral. Yeah. Bill, go ahead. Read 47-48.
But 600 men turned and fled to the wilderness, to the rock of Rimmon, and abode in the rock of Rimmon for 4 months. And the men of Israel turned back upon the children of Benjamin and smote them with the edge of the sword, both the men of every city and the beasts and all that came to hand. Also they set on fire the cities that they came to.
Okay. So Sid, this might be argued as saying, yeah, but this might be a different view that was added afterwards, by the way. Yes, they only killed the men, but you know what? They also kind of killed everybody else. It's hinted at here, all that comes to hand. So in any case, a huge loss as far as the Benjaminites are concerned.
Almost
and next
the whole
week,
tribe.
right? And well, not the whole tribe, because of course they're going to come back with a vengeance with Saul in a little bit. But and we'll get to the final chapter of this problematic part of the book of Judges next week in our final one. But beforehand, a little bit of just summing up a rabbinic section from Masechet Yomah about the Urim v'Tumim and this particular war. Dan, if you would do us the honors, please.
Why is it called Urim v'Tumim? Urim, which is based on the word or, light, is so called because it illuminates and explains its words. Tumim, which is based on the word tam, completed, is because it fulfills its words, which always come true. And if you say, in the battles following the incidents of Givah and Benjamin, why did the Urim and V'Tumim not fulfill its words? The Israelites consulted Urim V'Tumim 3 times with regard to their decision to attack the tribe of Benjamin, and each time they were instructed to go to battle. However, the first 2 times they were defeated, and only on the 3rd attempt were they successful. Is this not proof that the Urim V'Tumim does not always fulfill its words? The first 2 times they did not check with the Urim V'Tumim whether they would be victorious or be defeated, but only inquired how and whether they should go to battle. Had they asked, they indeed would have been told that they would not succeed. But on the last time, when they did check and inquire when they would be successful, the Urim Tumim agreed with them that they should go to battle and that they would succeed, as it is stated. And Pinchas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, stood before it in those days, saying, shall I yet again go out to battle against the children of Benjamin, my brother, or shall I cease? And God said, go up, for tomorrow I will deliver him into your hand.
So you can see very much that the Talmud has influenced my understanding of this section of the Book of Judges. But I also think it's the simple meaning of the text. This is one of those cases in which a midrashic, agadic section from rabbinic literature really goes to the heart, I think, of what the narrator is trying to tell us here. And that goes back to what John helped us with, saying you got to know what questions to ask and what is in the background of what question. When you ask a particular question, it belies things that you're feeling, what you're thinking. And finally, I'll say, as far as this is concerned in modern Israeli society, the great sin, the great breakdown of the Israeli government in the Israeli psyche, unfortunately, is not the occupation. That's for a small amount of us Israelis. But the great one by the most amount of people is, anybody know? What is considered to be the greatest failure of Israeli society in the 70, 80 years?
Difference between secular and the
No, that's not bemoaned. People complain about it, but that's not considered to be a failure. See, the difference between secular and Orthodox, that could be, you could attribute that to certain policy, but there's one particular failure that everybody talks about, and that's the Yom Kippur War. Even today, and on every Yom Kippur, while there are now probably more than there were 30, 40, 50 years ago, articles in the newspaper about tshuva and different ways of expressing Yom Kippur, the newspapers around Yom Kippur are filled with, again, rehashing what exactly went wrong. And the anger of people to this very day who were soldiers and felt betrayed because intelligence was ignored. That people, it's kind of like what happened here in a small way after the bombing in Afghanistan a few weeks ago, or whenever that was, a month ago. Everybody wants to why everybody's using it for political reason. Well, in Israel, the Yom Kippur War, everybody across the board found ways to criticize, and Golda Meir was very much in the center of that criticism. But the entire government and Tzahal, the Israeli army. And this constant going back to it, because the intelligence was there, but it was ignored again because Israelis felt too overconfident in their military prowess because of the 6-Day War, right? Which was not, in the scheme of things, was not that many years beforehand. At the time when I was a kid, it seemed like eons between when I was a kid, 6-Day War, and then when the Yom Kippur War, which was right after I spent a whole year in Israel in 73. So this going back to kind of think of what the rabbis are doing in the Talmud here is they're kind of going back and analyzing. So what did we, Bnei Yisrael, what did we do wrong in this story? And because we didn't ask the right question. At least John, that is certainly the way the Talmud sees it. They agree with you. Okay, folks. So again, an unfortunate story, this whole thing, but we'll get to. We'll get to the ending of the Book of Judges next week, all right? And we'll see you then. As far as this Monday, we are renewing the series on Daniel. If you're participating in that, so you have the details, or you're on their mailing list. But if not, I think in tomorrow's announcement, we'll be putting out the ad for the Daniel group if you want to hitch a ride with that till we finish. That's going to be another 5 or 6 weeks at least, I think, judging from where we are in the book of Daniel. And as far as another book is concerned, I'm now thinking of maybe doing the book of Joel, which is a 4-chapter book in the 12 minor prophets. I don't know yet, but if you have requests or ideas, please let me know. Okay? All right, everybody.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi.
Be
Thank
well.
you,
You're
Rabbi.
welcome. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.